Okay, so Saturday morning, I hope there is not so much hangover here, because we're going to talk about something really interesting. When I was preparing this panel, I was shocked to realize that these fancy little things we use to store our keys are 10 years old already. So we have here three different perspectives of what has happened in this, what is now called probably an industry. So first question I wanted to ask you is, what's your perspective on how this industry has changed in these last 10 years, Pavol?
So in order to explain how the industry has changed, I should probably start by saying how it started, right? So we started to work in Trezor back in 2012 when I met with Marek Palatinus, the other co-founder of Satoshi Labs, and we recognized the need for a thing that will protect your private keys outside of the unsecure environment of your laptop, that kind of hardware. And basically what I want to say is that it was our problem, and we had a really big motivation to solve these problems for us. It was never meant to be a business or to start an industry. But since we started working on that, I had a lot of feedback from our friends, and the Bitcoin community was still small, so there was discussion on the Bitcoin Talk forum, and it seemed like this was the issue that other people also saw and wanted to get solved. And after a year, we were confident we have something that we can provide to the world, and we started a campaign in 2013, and it was supposed to be a Kickstarter campaign, but the Kickstarter didn't really want to launch our campaign, and they also didn't want to tell us why. So at one point we were like, okay, let's do it our way. Marek sat down and he wrote an e-shop in Python in about maybe 2 or 3 days, and we added a Bitcoin option there, and we made an option for people to pre-order these devices. So we had a pre-order for Trezor Model 1, the plastic one, which was 1 Bitcoin, which might seem a lot, but it was just $80 back then. And we also had a special edition of metallic Trezor for 3 Bitcoins, or $240. And what happened there is that in a few weeks we were able to sell 1,000 pre-orders. And we were like, okay, so this is probably much bigger than we thought, because the whole community of Bitcoiners back then was rather small, and we knew most of the people in person. So even though we had this initial feedback that it's a good idea, we didn't expect it would be so big. And the other thing what happened was that when we went to the manufacturer, that we want to produce 1,000 of these devices with the specs we already had, we just got laughed at, because the producer, hardware manufacturer, just said, well, unless you order 30,000 of them, I'm not even like starting the machines for you. Like, this is a very small business to participate in. So after a lot of negotiation, we said, okay, let's just risk it and make 30,000 of these devices. And I'm really happy to say that it started the whole industry. And we are here with other great hardware wallets, and it seems there is a lot of users for that as well. That said, I want to say 2 different things, and I'm getting to the comparison. Don't worry about it. The community back then was really, really small, and it was they had much better understanding what Bitcoin is, and what is a private key, and what is a public key, and stuff like that. So we didn't really need to explain what Trezor does and what it doesn't. But what now, the whole crypto industry is around 500 million people, and still only a very, very small fraction of them have understanding how it works, and even smaller fraction of that have a hardware wallet. So we are now in a position where we have to explain stuff much more thoroughly, because these people that are coming to Bitcoin right now, they don't really know what is a private key, what is a public key, what is a cryptography behind it. They just want to securely store their Bitcoin, and most of them think that their bitcoins are stored in a hardware wallet, which is technically not true, but I think it's a very useful metaphor to understand it. But it has some caveats that we need to be explaining, that it's not just the hardware wallet that is keeping the secret. There is also this paper backup, which also needs to be protected. So we have to be really careful about not basically downplaying the whole complex topic of security into just one simple message, because then the message can be misunderstood, and we have to be always careful and patient to explain the things to the wider community.
Douglas, when do we find Bitbox One? That was I believe, your first product. When do we find it, and what's your perspective on the industry?
Yeah, so the Bitbox 01, so actually, I think Trezor's done a great job. They're pioneers. It's really impressive. But to maybe say a comparison to the industry then and now, the reason I started working on a hardware wallet was because I didn't trust the pre-sale from Trezor would actually come out. And it's not because of Trezor. The reason was, at that time, there's a lot of scams in the mining industry. So miners were a big thing that time. A lot of people were trying to get into it, and you had to do pre-sales for that. And there's a lot of scams where you'd give your money to make a big batch order because of the manufacturing issue, and then people would run away with the money. And so when I got involved, it was very similar. Had my own need, got really good feedback when I created a wallet. And I basically the concept existed, but I didn't know if it would actually be produced, so I just decided to make my own. And got really good feedback. We're based in Switzerland, so there's a really good community in Switzerland. A lot of great promotion. So yeah, and we're happy to try to equip people, empower people to also participate. And I think hardware wallets do that. They make security easy. And so now, as we go on, the field has matured a lot. I think now you don't have to worry about pre-orders. You can go to a lot of different places, get your wallet delivered in a couple days. I think that's great, but it's still really, really early. So 10 years seems like a long time in Bitcoin, but in like other technical spaces, it's actually really small. And I think we see that still in terms of there's a lot of different varieties in security models, in UX, in form factors, things like that. And there's still a lot of exploratory options around it. Like we all have 3 different wallets with 3 different kind of ways to go about it. And so I think as the field matures, it'll be interesting. Is this going to coalesce into a single direction, or is it going to kind of distribute into different use cases for different people?
Lawrence, Jade is quite new. I think it's 2 years old, if I'm not wrong. But you have been dealing with or working with hardware wallets since long. You were explaining me before. So what's your perspective on this very young industry?
Right. When I started working in Bitcoin, precisely on green address, I was very, very excited to hear when Trezor was being worked on, and basically I was very, very keen on integrating support as soon as possible, because I saw a huge potential for improved security, but not just that, it's also convenience in my opinion, because you can use multiple devices. If you have a hardware wallet and confidently access your funds, because you know they're secured by your hardware wallet on say, different laptops or mobiles or companion apps per se. So it's not just security. In my opinion, it was also a boost for convenience and feeling as well, in terms of perception and confidence. And yes, as soon as Trezor came out, I remember they sent me this adapter for Raspberry Pi that basically allowed you to develop or to integrate without actually having the real Trezor. I think it was a simulator sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, I was very happy to integrate. Similarly, at some point, there was a BT chip, the HWW. It was a displayless smart card USB device. And now we know this, without display, there's, you're missing a fundamental piece. Like you want to validate where you're sending and how much you're sending and everything. So without a display, you're really limited. By the time, you know, as I said, I was implementing green address and it's multi-sig, and I was relying on the fact that you still have the two-factor mechanism to tell you who and what you're, you know, how much you're sending and to whom. Like you could get the address and amount on an SMS or an email, maybe GPG signed too. And so I was really happy to integrate the hardware wallets. And, you know, I love diversity in this because I think it improves security and it raises the bar as well. So it's been an exciting 10 years, I must say.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room from the last month, because hardware wallets, Pavol, you were saying that you had a need to keep secrets, no? Secret. So that's why we have nowadays hardware wallets, to little devices that they will keep our keys and they will not leave the device. But because of Ledger's recent announcement, people have started to question if these devices are really capable to keep the secrets inside. So I would like to ask you about that. Like, how would you talk to somebody who has this fear? How would you explain if they can be calm or not about keeping their keys in a hardware wallet?
I think the real issue with this feature is not the feature itself, but first of all, how it was communicated or how it was not communicated. And the other thing, which is even a bigger problem in my eyes, is that the Ledger was basically trying to reduce the whole complex debate about physical security and security of hardware wallets to just a very simple message. This is a hardware wallet which is produced by us, and it can keep secret because we are using certified secure element, while there are these other wallets which don't have secure elements, so it's very easy to extract the keys from them, and thus they are insecure. And after several years, they basically broke this promise, and now they have a really big trouble communicating all these nuances because the discussion has been really reduced to a very simple binary vision, and this binary vision is what attracted their users. So there is no surprise they have really big trouble understanding all these nuances, while I think we are in a much better position with Trezor because we were forced to constantly explain the users that it's not about the security of the chip, it's also about how do you protect your physical paper backup. It's also about your physical OPSEC security, because if somebody can steal your Trezor, they might as well torture you and ask you for the PIN and even where your paper backup is stored. So I think we should really strive on educating about how those features work and what are their caveats, and that's it. I mean, there hasn't been a proper discussion about the trade-offs, and of course, the other issue is how these seeds are stored at some kind of institution that do KYC, and it opens like the whole new discussion about not only the KYC, whether it's moral or immoral, but also how you can break this process, because now we have generative AI. Like, it's very easy to generate a picture of a person that doesn't exist or a person that does exist. So I'm just wondering how the KYC process in general will handle these new issues where it's very easy to fake someone's identity unless they go to the KYC provider in person, which is very inconvenient, especially if there are like free entities like this spread all over the world. So, I mean, it opened a very important discussions that was neglected or maybe even suppressed earlier. And I'm happy that this is being discussed right now. And what seemed to be like a very easy topic of security to 90% of people out there, now they are thinking, okay, so it's not that simple. I should maybe think more about what it means and what it doesn't mean.
Douglas, same question, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper. Like, is it possible to keep a secret in a device and knowing that it will not leave it?
So I think, so first of all, I agree with everything Pavol said. And the thing is, when you have a hardware device, someone else makes it, you do have to trust them in some sense. And so I think if someone says, it's like we often say, anything can be hacked. I think that's very true. If someone says, we're completely foolproof, you can't hack us, it's so false. Maybe they don't have enough experience, or they're just outright lying. And I think when it comes to the secrets in the chip, there always will be ways to get it out if someone is clever enough to do it. And so there is an element of trust involved in the hardware wallet company. And how we approach that is trying to be as transparent as possible. And so I think this is where open source is really important, where not only for security where people can review your code, but also for accountability. I think accountability might be even the more important factor, where what we do, we open it up, anyone can see it, and if we're trying to extract secrets in some way, people would see that in the code. And I think, you know, despite all this, hardware wallets still are orders of magnitudes better than like software wallets or exchanges, things like that. But yeah, there's always going to be an element of trust, and so it's, I think all three of us are very pro being transparent, pro being, yeah, please come look at our code, you know, help us be better also. And so I guess that's how I address it.
Lawrence, what's your take?
Yeah, I was thinking, yeah, I mean, there's no way to prove that something is not extractable from a hardware device. Even if you design it such that it's not possible, from your perspective, there's always going to be someone smarter than you or with access, with more resources than you, that can actually extract the secret. So you could try to prevent even yourself from being able to do so, either via software or even by writing hardware that doesn't even have the facilities to extract, you know, even if you wanted to write code for it. But ultimately, someone smarter than you will come around and use ACID and open the chip and extract the secret if they want to, if they really want to.
Can I maybe add something to that?
Sure.
There are two mechanisms that are not a silver bullet, but they really, really help, and they cover like 99% of the issues that we have kind of mentioned. And first of all is when designing Trezor back in 2012, we were really aware of the fact that any hardware is hackable, and if somebody says that their hardware is hackable, they are either lying or they don't really understand how the hardware works. And that's why we introduced the passphrase feature in the bit39, which has been an integral part of our hardware wallet, and since this standard was adopted by literally any other hardware wallet out there, it's a good thing, because now you don't really have to trust your device. You can put a passphrase on top, and this is not like a password that can be recovered. It just your passphrase is just being mixed into the secret story into the device. So it has two features. One, first of all, if you forget it, then it's not a very good thing, because then you basically lost your funds. But the other way around, like if you never share it to anyone, and you shouldn't, then nobody is able to get to your funds. And the other thing is, I don't want to get really technical, but there is such thing called deterministic builds. So basically what we do is not only we provide the source code on the internet for everybody to look into, but also we provide instructions to build this source code, and then you can verify that the firmware we are distributing to our users really comes from the source code we've been publishing. And if we were able to publish some kind of malicious firmware that can extract secrets or do whatever to your device, the community out there will notice that. And let me just give you an example. What happened 4 weeks ago. We have one component that's called Trezor Bridge, and it provides a communication between Trezor and the browser. And my colleague did a small mistake that he he released a new version of the bridge, and in the GitHub repository he marked a different commit as the version that was released. And in the following 10 hours, we received more than 7 emails from different people all around the world saying, this really seems odd because you released the version like this, and on the GitHub there is a different source code, it doesn't really match. So indeed, this is not like a wish. There are literally thousands of people out there looking at our hands, and if you are not paranoid, if you are paranoid, maybe just don't update the same day we release the firmware, but if you wait a week or two, I mean, this has been checked by thousands of people all around the world. So you can be pretty much sure that we are not trying to publish a firmware that will scam you.
May I add a couple of things? So I really like the passphrase feature in BIP39. However, I always thought of the argument whereby you say, if I have a very good passphrase, it may as well be my private key. And if it's that strong and that good, maybe it's also hard to memorize. And so there's a balance there, I think. But it is a good two-factor in a way, and you know, if you can't remember, you should try to store it in a safe place, possibly separate from the actual seed. The other thing I was thinking is open source, I think it's very important. Reproducible builds are very important, but ultimately there's basically no way to prove that a certain chip is running a certain firmware. And even when there are ways to kind of say so, it's usually by means of trusting the hardware manufacturer, which again, you shouldn't really trust 100%, in my opinion.
Sorry, just one more thing. And there is another solution to this. Since our hardware wallets are open source, you can always just go and buy off-the-shelf components and build your own one. So I see that people doing that with Trezor, probably with Bitbox that happens as well. And your hardware wallet is even better in that regard, that there are actually several ways how to combine different components to just build your wallet. And Andrew Beck was just showing me yesterday some YouTube video where there is a guy who is building all these kind of Frankenstein combinations of hardware. It looks really, really nice. So, I mean, the community, the makers community, which is overlapping with the Bitcoin community, is very active in that regard as well.
I mean, absolutely, but I don't necessarily mean the hardware wallet manufacturer. It could also be simply the chip manufacturer. You don't even know necessarily that the chip is doing only what's on the tin, what's on the specification. It may do more, and you may not know. It may not even be that chip. It may be a chip that simulates the chip that you intended to use in the first place. But it is absolutely true that trying to source components independently of Bitcoin industry, it's certainly a way to reduce that risk.
It's great that you're talking about chips now, because my next question was going in that direction. The ledger fear was more related in remote attacks, so online attacks to your device from somebody who is maybe in the other side of the world. But there is also the physical attacks, no? And that, for example, what you always say is the evil mate attack. Somebody finding your hardware wallet and trying to get the secret out of it. And for that, it has been said for many years, probably Ledger has been one of the ones pushing this idea, that secure elements are a must. Here we have two devices or two manufacturers that don't use secure elements, plus Bitbox using them. So my question is a very open question, but to secure element or to not secure element, Pavol?
It seems like you are trying to bring like this binary vision again, by the way you ask your question, and I think we should express more. This is more like a scale, and these three hardware wallets have really good solutions to the issue at hand, and I will let the guys explain that how they solve the issue with having or not having secure element. We at Trezor, we have looked at several secure element vendors, and we were not really happy how what is the state or their documentation or even communication of their company and so on. And so ultimately we decided that we won't put any secure element in our current hardware offering. And we just said, until there is a good solution for us, we are not going to have secure element. That said, we are trying to explain our users these physical attacks are possible, and if this is really part of your security threat model, then you should be using passphrase. And also this, after we got to a certain size and our options became more and more, more things were able to be achieved in our company. We started a company called Tropic Square in 2020, and our goal is no smaller than just creating the world's first open source secure element. And we've been building that for almost 3 years. There are still few months or years ahead of us, but I really would like to ask people to check our booth in the back when there is a microscope where you can have a look at the chip under how it actually looks. So we already have first prototypes, which still need a lot of months of testing, but we really like to be as open, as transparent from the beginning, and having a decapped chip on the booth is a proof that we really want to be part of this communication. And personally, I would be really happy if all hardware wallet vendors were using open and transparent secure chips, but simply there was no other option. So this is our way. It's a little bit more, maybe on the extremistic side of things, not pragmatic, but I really like that there is this diversity in the hardware wallet ecosystem, and if some people want to use secure elements, they have the option too, but I want to provide another option from a completely different part of the scale.
Douglas.
Yeah, so we do use a secure element in our device. I think we use it in a unique way where we try to use it in what we call a trustless manner, so a very minimal manner. And so our code is all open source, but we do use a secure element for some basic cryptographic functions where this secure element's never going to learn your secret, even if it's fully backdoored, if there's bugs in it, you still should be okay. And I think secure elements, what their purpose is to provide some protection mechanisms against physical access, and so physical theft. And so in my opinion, I think physical theft makes sense to be covered in the threat model of a hardware wallet, and so that's why we use it. And I think security in depth in as many ways as possible is good. That said, I think the Tropic Square project is really amazing. I'm really glad you guys are working on that, and it's not only for Bitcoin or wider cryptocurrency ecosystem, but just the whole security industry. I think would be very, very happy when that comes to market. So I wish you the best of luck with that.
Thank you.
And Lawrence, you don't use secure element, but you use another kind of system to provide physical security.
Yeah, let me start with saying I agree with what Pavol and Douglas said so far. It's not black and white. There's a degree of grays, so to speak. There's also multiple ways you can use secure elements. We know that Ledger uses it differently from Bitbox or from CoinKite, for example. Coldcard, for example. Ultimately, secure elements tend to provide us a harder barrier, for physical theft or physical access. At the same time, they're usually not as easily available to consumers. It's non-trivial to say buy those things on non-Bitcoin. Let's say AliExpress or Amazon or whatever. You usually have to buy from specialized places, and you probably have to build the board yourself, or at least spend a lot of time in setting up and study using those. It's basically hard to find them off the shelf. So that was one of the reasons we don't use secure elements. When I started working on Jade, it was trivial for me to start working on boards that I could find on both Amazon and AliExpress just to get to the point where everything was working and I was happy with the product. Obviously, I knew that there was a limit with the physical access, and I knew that the chip we were using, even though it has some security feature like secure boot and flash encryption, I knew someone would have eventually gone and broke it. And so we invented this concept we call the blind pin oracle, whereby it's almost as if you have a virtualized secure element elsewhere that doesn't know your pin, doesn't know your secret, but it helps you in protecting your secret locally. And if you don't like to use the one that is provided by the manufacturer, because we made that too open source, you can run your own, whether you want to run it on some remote location through Tor, or in your office when you're at home, or something like that. It's quite unique. I think we're the first one to use it, but because it's open source, we're hoping that others can also take advantage of this. For example, SeedSigner at the moment is stateless. We also support stateless, but stateless it's not for everybody. And I think the method we use does provide an extra barrier for physical attacks.
And moving forward, thinking about the future, there is a lot of really interesting things coming to Bitcoin. We have Miniscript, we have Music, we have Frost. That's all amazing. I love them, all these features. But I wanted to ask you, for your perspective, you are talking to a big audience. So how do you evaluate accepting these features versus making the product more easy for these new users that are onboarding and want security?
First, let me say that although we are a company that is 10 years in the market, we are still a small company. We are not Microsoft, and we have to really carefully choose what we are working on, because we can't be working on everything. And unfortunately, in a company with our size, it's always about some trade-off. So let me give you an example. Either we work on conjoin, or we work on a Lightning integration, or we won't work on all this bleeding edge, interactive multisig stuff. And I think it would not be wise at this stage to try to ride all the horses at once. So our priorities are in the order I just mentioned that. And of course, I'm a geek, so I'm keeping up with the development, so we can maybe decide what should we integrate or not, and be ready when this is being basically ordered by the community. But since we are not really profiling in the multisig market, I'm just kind of waiting what other companies that are integrating Trezor for multisig really want. But as I said, I want to be ready if they want to have this feature in Trezor. That said, it's not multisig cannot be used on Trezor. We are pretty much feature complete. This is just not our core offering in our product suite.
Douglas?
Yeah, it's similar. So our focus is really, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we want to empower people to join the space. And so what that means is we're really targeting new users to the space, to really give them tools that are really easy to use to jump in. And so when it comes to new features, of course, our engineers want to implement all of them, but it's a question of priorities, of course. And then, just practically speaking, we have businesses to run, we have to pay salaries, and so it's also depends heavily on the market, if the market's ready for things. And I think, Miniscript, Usig, really fascinating things, but probably especially for Miniscript, maybe the use cases need to be a bit more fleshed out, such that they're more obvious to the general public about what cool things these can be used for.
I think, though, that in Miami, you said that Miniscript will come before the end of the year.
Did I say that?
Well, or somebody. Can we say it again, or maybe not?
Yeah, I mean, we're working on it in the background for sure. And so probably it will be, the Bitbox will be compatible with that. But whether or not we actively do it in our own app, for example, that's a different question. Again, that will depend on the use cases and the UX and some market research.
And Lawrence, I'm really interested in your take on this question because I see that Rick is pushing new features every 2 weeks, more or less. Like he's fulfilling the word of 2 weeks for him is real. And the last thing I saw was some mini-script testing even already. So how do you balance these new users, new features?
Well, likewise, we also have to prioritize things, and we also have to choose and pick what things are, the most urgent, the most important for our users. Yes, we have started working on Miniscript. It's not finished yet, but we're in a good place. I think we're basically finalizing the UX and finalizing the review for the pull request. I'm very excited about this. And what can I say? Some of these things take quite careful consideration, not just in terms of prioritization, but also in terms of user experience. For example, as you said, we have new proposals, not so new now, but like Musig and Frost and whatnot, that actually require a lot of interaction and interactivity, but that interactivity also breaks some models. For example, QR codes becomes really a pain if you have to have a lot of interaction. Same goes for, say, SD cards. At that point, USB or cable seems the most convenient option for those kind of features. And so maybe when we work on these things, we'll prioritize those first. To give you an example, the firmware upgrade on Jade can be done through cable and through BLE if you activated that or if you use the firmware that enables that. But some users have been asking firmware upgrade through QR codes, which it's technically possible. But it's probably going to be very, very painful. At the end of the day, if it's not too hard, we will try to implement things that users are asking. But yeah, we also have to prioritize and carefully consider the drawbacks, really.
And we have our last 4 minutes, so I want to ask you, because in these 10 years, hardware wallets have been hardware wallets, but recently a lot of people started to say maybe they are not wallets, they are just signers, and maybe the concept, we need to maybe call them for what they do. And that I want to mix with the idea that, for example, with Miniscript, hardware wallets are going to need to store more things, not only keys. They will need to store somehow the script of the Miniscript, the script policy. And yeah, I wanted to ask you, like, how do you think the industry or the knowledge of what a hardware wallet is will move on, having to deal with more than one secret, more than not only keys, let's say, Pavol?
I maybe just for the first part of the question, whether a hardware wallet is a hardware wallet or it's a signing device. I think it can be both. It's like asking, hey, is my laptop, is it a computer or is it a bicycle for my mind? Like if I'm watching videos, I'm not computing anything on that. So I think Trezor is a little bit of both, and let me expand on that. If you use Trezor with some kind of third-party multi-sig application, I like to see as Trezor is a hardware signer, but if you use Trezor together with our Trezor suite, it becomes like a whole product which consists of a hardware wallet and a software wallet. So in that context, I like to prefer to use the term hardware wallet. So, and about the question where you should put the Miniscript or any kind of metadata, you have two options. Either you store them in a hardware wallet, or you just let the hardware wallet to sign the metadata, and then you can store it outside of the hardware wallet. But then there is this question where it should be. Like, should it be on your hard drive, or should it be stored in an application like Trezor Suite, which will handle all these too? So it comes to whether you want to be integrated into one polished user experience product, or whether you want to be as modular as possible to give people a lot of flexibility.
Douglas? Yeah, similar. So it was a bit confusing, I guess, with the jargon. What does a wallet mean? What does a signer mean? I guess the last talk, we didn't have a chance to hear it, but probably talked a lot about that also. And so I assume like a signing device means you just have the hardware wallet and then you can have interoperability with other apps. And I think that's very important because I think, there's a lot of different people in the world with different use cases. And so like using Sparrow or using Electrum and giving them the option to do that is great. And so of course we do that. I guess our approach from the beginning was kind of looking at Apple a little bit, how they control both the hardware and the software, and then through that process they're able to make a really smooth user experience, a really polished user experience. And so if we could drop like our app development, that's probably the majority of our engineering resources go to the software side, not the hardware, not the firmware. And so if we could drop that, yeah, sure, that's nice. But I think in order to give a product that's really, really good for the public, I think having this option where we're controlling both sides would give the most polished product.
And Lawrence, challenges of having to store now more than keys.
Well, first I want to also touch the software, the hardware wallet signer. I'm completely in favor of calling them hardware signers. I think people get confused with hardware wallets sometimes. I also saw that when I showed hardware wallets to people or hardware signers, they would say, oh, this is just a USB stick. You put the keys on it and this is what it does. No, that's exactly not what it does. When it comes to miniscript and things like that, unless the hardware manufacturer had some foresight into how much space they potentially will need in the future, you are forced to sign and commit to things and keep them externally, but then you cannot revoke them. So there's trade-offs there as well.
Will definitely change a lot, but yeah, it was really interesting to hear from where it started and how it's evolving, and really looking forward to maybe sit next year, in 2 years, in 3 years, and see how it has evolved, this amazing industry. Thank you, and let's give them all a big round of applause.
Thank you.